Shri Tripura Rahasyam Māhātmya-Khaṇḍam Aum Shri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha.
Namaste. So we've been going through Narada's questions that he asked Sumedha, now renamed Haritayana, after he appeared to him. And Haritayana asked him the question, how did I see you inside and then see you outside? So instead of giving an answer, Narada has asked a series of very pointed questions. And now this final question is a real doozy, which is why I call this episode the hardest question. Then, there, or at that time, why were entire external things not seen? Assuming that the senses saw me, tell me, of what avail was that to you? What happened to you? So, yeah, this is really deep. Then, there, or at that time. In other words, at the time when you so-called saw me inside and then outside, why were the external things, the whole world, not seen? See, these senses have defects. And one of the defects is, as I have pointed out several times, that things that are close appear large and things that are far away appear small. That's not right. My finger isn't changing in size, it's staying just the same. Well, why do we see it big when it's close and small far away? How come our senses seem to be localized to the immediate area of the body? If we really saw what was out there, why don't we see everything? Narada does. Narada's consciousness is not limited by the body. It's not conditioned by the idea of a bag of meat and bones. So when he sees the whole thing. He sees everything. Well, why don't you see like that, he's asking. What's the problem? What are you hung up on? But even assuming that the senses actually saw him, what was that to you? Who were you? And how is it that you can see at all? And what happened to you? Did it change you? See? He's asking all these really deep questions. So, who is the seer? Is it the senses? Is it the body? Is it the mind? Who or what is the seer? Now, this is the hardest question, and great philosophers have been wrestling with this question for thousands of years. But only in India have they actually reached an answer. And the reason is that the Western philosophies, the Western religions, and especially Western science, are founded on the assumption of duality. The seer and the seen. The inside and the outside. The mind and the body. The body and the senses. And so on and so on and so on. Binary logic, either right or wrong, true or false. You see, this is so limited. The Catholic Church in I think it was the 8th century, because they were being defeated by the Greeks. The Greeks were always, very advanced philosophers. And they couldn't even get a foothold in Greece. They were going to Greece with their best men and getting shot down in debates with the Greek philosophers. The Greek philosophers were saying, well, what is your system of logic? What is your theory of knowledge? What is your epistemology? What is your ontology? And they were going, what? They didn't have any of that. They just had a bunch of stories about Jesus, that's all. So they said, wait a minute, we got to get our act together. And they started an internal debate as to what system of logic or what theory of knowledge they should adopt. And of course, that was limited to the Greek philosophers, the classical Greeks. And unfortunately, they chose Aristotle as their system, Aristotelian logic. And Aristotelian logic is binary logic. It's Boolean logic, as we know it today. Binary means true or false, on or off, right or wrong, in or out, up or down. And there's no checkbox to say, well, neither or both or something else. Now that is not a limitation in Eastern logic. In Eastern logic, for example, Jain logic, we did a whole series on Jain logic because it's quite interesting. It's called Anāhata-cakra. Anāhata means there isn't just one conclusion. There isn't just one answer to any question. So, depending on your point of view, things can look different. Now, isn't that more real? Isn't that how life actually is? Huh? So, anyway, the poor Christians, they picked this binary logic, Aristotelian logic, and because of that, all subsequent attempts at philosophy have failed to answer even the most basic questions like what is consciousness? Because that question cannot be answered using the assumption of duality. It can only be answered on the assumption of non-duality being the primary. Non-duality means no differences, no changes, no boundaries. It's Brahman, the logic of Brahman, the logic of pure consciousness. Pure consciousness has no boundaries. There are no differences. It never changes. It's always the same. It's always aware. Just like a mirror. You can put something in front of a mirror and the mirror will reflect it accurately. Day or night. It doesn't matter. Any color, any shape, any form, whether moving or non-moving or whatever quality it might have, the mirror will reflect it faithfully. So in the same way, consciousness is always operating. It never changes. It always reflects whatever is put in front of it. Whether it's waking, dreaming, or deep sleep, or whatever it is, your consciousness will show it to you just as it is. And consciousness is not subject to the limitations of the senses. So when you're aware of something directly through consciousness, it doesn't matter whether it's near or far. Distance, dimension, space, time, these aren't limitations for consciousness. Now, for someone on Narada's platform, the Ajata platform, the world appears whole, as it is, without boundaries, without limitations, and without any specific locus of consciousness. Consciousness is all-pervading. So to Narada, yesterday, today, tomorrow, here or there, inside or outside, are all the same. And they all look the same. Now, of course, in order to communicate with us who are bound by duality, Narada can assume a point of view. He can manifest a body that is perceptible to our consciousness. But where is that body? Is it in the world? No. No, he never comes in the world. He's always out. Or, let's put it this way, whether in or out doesn't matter to him. Just like we were talking yesterday about the movie. The movie theater may show so many things happening on the screen, but all those are just projections. We talked about a train, for example. So in the movie, some people are in the train or on the train, and some people are off the train, maybe standing on the station or by the tracks. So either they're in the train or they're out of the train. But wait a minute, we're in the theater, we're watching the movie. Is anybody really in the train? No, because there isn't really a train. There's just an image of a train projected on a screen and reflected back to us. So in the same way, when things appear to our senses, they're reflected back into our consciousness. And we, the seer, being influenced by duality, accept the point of view of the senses as being real. But actually it's not real. And the proof is that things change depending on their relation to our point of view. This is relativist philosophy. This is duality, you see. But for non-duality, these are not issues at all. There's no problem. See, Narada doesn't have to be even within the universe for Haritayana to see him. He can just project a form. He has power over Maya. So in this way, Narada is asking these questions. And the final question is, what happened to you? Where are you in all of this? Who are you? And what are you? This is the question. This is why Ramana Maharshi used to always ask her, who are you? If we think that we are this body, then we come under so many limitations, so many dualistic conditionings that make it very hard for us to perceive reality. Actually impossible. And out of convenience, we accept so many things to be true that actually aren't true. For example, the idea that I am this body, or I am this mind, or this identity, or any of the labels or designations associated with it, or any of the possessions or qualities that it seems to have. These are all part of duality, and therefore they cannot be who we really are. We are the seer. Actually, we're even beyond the seer, but let's just go that far for now. We are the seer. We are the witness. We are the one who perceives the world. That's the first step. Let's get to that point before we try to go any further. So, being the seer means we are not bound by these conditions. Like the mirror. The mirror simply reflects. It doesn't try to understand or interpret or change things or do anything. The mirror is completely passive, and so is consciousness. This is why the goddess Tripura, you knew I'd get back to this eventually, right? Tripura Sundari, the goddess who is consciousness, is female, feminine, passive, yin. Huh? And she's also of a dark color, although she can manifest the most brilliant effulgence. Naturally, her form is dark red color. So that's why we wear the vermilion on the third eye. Because she is the consciousness. She is the awareness of awareness. If you ask someone, do you exist? They'll say, of course I exist, right? And if you ask them, how do you know? The answer always has something to do with being aware of stuff. What is this awareness? What is this consciousness? See, this is the hardest question. And if you begin to inquire into it, and I don't mean by reading books or doing research, I mean by sitting and looking into it directly within yourself. We did a whole series on that called Secret of the Golden Flower. Although it was not actually given in the same terminology that we're using these days, terminology of Advaita tradition. It was given in the terminology of the Chinese Buddhist tradition. But still, functionally, it's equivalent. That you take your attention, which is normally directed toward the world, and turn it around and direct it toward yourself, and start inquiring, start looking into this. Who am I? What am I? That's the work. That work has to be done to attain enlightenment, to realize freedom from suffering, and to attain ultimate self-realization. Om Tat Sat. Om Harihi Om.